in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Madhur Kathuria, and welcome to our next webinar on using Agile practices in business intelligence, data warehousing, and big data projects. So I hope you have been following our webinars that we have been posting on different topics. So this is next in the series of workshops and webinars that we are launching specific to the industries and the programs. So now let's talk about how we can apply to a very tough field, as it is called, in terms of executing projects, because according to a survey, only about 50% of projects that are initiated in the BI DW world ever are considered successful. So is there a way, by using some of the Agile practices and the philosophy, we can actually make them successful? Now, just to introduce, and some of you do already know me, my name is Madhur Kathuria, and I am a certified Scrum trainer and a coach. So we'll discuss more about some of my experiences that we have that I have been working with various customers, various teams on such projects. So we are going to be today discussing about, first of all, we'll start with basics and a little bit brief about how BI and DW projects are different, how Agile philosophy and practices can help with them, and then any common pitfalls that you can avoid. Now, before we start, like every time, just a quick reminder, in case you have any questions, on the right hand side of your screen, you'll find a questions button, so you can log a question there. And during the webinar or just after, if I finish my talk, I'll be answering those questions as the case might be. And also the recording of this webinar will be available after the webinar within a week on our website. So you can also refer to this later and also inform it to your colleagues. So Saurabh, I'll just try to see if the voice is a little bit better, hopefully. So now let's get started. Now, when I say BI and data warehousing, I basically want to talk about three different perspectives of the data sciences. The first part is in terms of creating, maintaining, and designing data warehouses, where you can pool data from different sources based on different parameters, based on different ways of thinking that your stakeholders might have. Second part that I would like to talk about is how do we now use this data which is in a particular warehouse in terms of different reports, in terms of creating different insights, and for analysis of certain situations and maybe user behaviors for that matter. And then the new buzzword, big data, which is something even more bigger, even more messy at a very large scale, where you don't kind of just focus on doing it in a little stage, but the data is available in real time, in large volumes, and it may not just come from your traditional data sources. Your pictures could be one of the data sources, your social media could be a data source. So how do you work on those behaviors? In fact, the machine learning would be involved here, how to classify behaviors. So typical challenges I'm sure a lot of you would have also faced while executing BI and data warehousing projects. First of all is focusing on data quality. Because if the data quality is not maintained, the decisions which are taken by stakeholders based on the data might actually lead to a different or a downfall of business. It could be that dangerous. So it is imperative for any business to make sure that the data they are generating, data they are processing, analyzing is correct, is derived from the right sources, and it helps them actually take decisions. Second problem or challenge when you face with any data projects is the designing the data warehouse, because one, the user needs might keep on changing. Second, the sources that you are sourcing, that you are bringing your data from, where you are creating your data sets, they may or may not have the data that you might need. So how do you source the data? The third part is involving and how do you involve the end users, because typically in BI and DW projects, the end users are sometimes far removed from where the actual project is being executed, and in case they do not find the data useful, they may not use the data warehouse, or they may ask for certain changes, or they may simply ask for, oh, this is a bug, we don't need this. So you have to design your data warehouse and the reports carefully. The third part when it comes is testing, because most of the time before you deploy your solution to the production, you will still need to test it, and the live data may not always be available. A typical example being, for example, the BFSI industry, where you will typically not have access to the live data for the users. You will probably only have to work on a sample data set and test all your solutions and reports based on that sample data set. And in case your test data set somehow doesn't match the end data set, you will again run into troubles, and the users even might see it as a quality issue. So all these four points and aspects that I mentioned, though they are typically interrelated, but they give the most challenging times to the engineers and data scientists who are actually working on these projects. So now, how do we solve this? But before we go there, let's take a little step back in terms of are the data projects that we are talking about, are they really different, or are they same as we have been executing other IT projects? So first thing that we need to understand that in a typical IT project, it's the engineering, it's the product management which will give you requirements. Okay, these are my requirements and this is something that I need. But here, it is the business who is actually going to take decisions based on your based on what they need. So it is kind of a reverse fulfillment, if I like to call it that way. Rather than somebody defining, okay, this is what the market might need, and then the market, then the stakeholders using the data, you will have to work, and these projects have to be done from business. What do they need for their insights and their analytics? So involvement of business is very important here. The second part, which typically which is easier in other projects and which is different in the in data projects. In a typical IT project, the analysts, the SMEs, the architects may come at the start. They may say, okay, this is how the design and architecture looks like, and then the development team takes over. They develop according to those specifications and requirements, and then you simply deliver the product or the solution. But when it comes to the data-based projects, analysts and SMEs are continuously required, sometimes to check the sanity of the data, sometimes to check the design of the warehouse, sometimes to change the parameters as might be required. So their involvement is way more deep, way more continuous than your normal IT projects. Now, another aspect we have been so used to in the IT industry, in the product development industry, that we try to define all the requirements as much as possible in advance, and then we say, okay, now this is the project plan based on these requirements. These are the execution dates, and this is an MTP. But when it comes to data projects, it is almost impossible to define the requirements in advance, because users at best would have a broad level idea, oh, this is I might be looking for. But then when they see the actual reports, when they see the actual data, they might get more ideas. So your design, your data sets, your golden records, they have to be flexible enough for change so that you can fulfill the real user requirements. Now that leads to another problem. The other problem that will lead to is, because it is a continuous change in the design, continuous change in the requirements, expectations, that also means testing becomes more crucial. Being a data warehouse project itself, that means there's a lot of data you are dealing with from different sources. That itself is complex. But then once you find that maybe your data sets don't match, or that they don't have the requirements, you need to continuously keep on testing this as you collect more data, as you build up your data warehouse. Then you need to fix up certain issues which the users might have reported during the testing. And then if any requirement changes, any additional things which might be required, you again would need to refix and rerun those tests. Okay. So Deepak has a question, can we apply the concept of cross-functional feature team in these projects? So I'm going to shortly come back to that question, Deepak, so just hold on. Next problem which we need to look into, or the next challenge we need to look into, is typically the change is difficult. A lot of times when you initiate your BI and data warehousing projects, the end users, the stakeholders are very used to using maybe an Excel sheet or any other form of collating data, and it is very difficult for them to move to a well-known system. It takes a transition time. Now, till that time, your data that might be entering might be corrupted, it may not be complete, or it may simply not serve the purpose. So how do you move your users? How do you tell them, guys, we need to bring in a change? Now you need to shun your traditional data collection and data analysis practices and move to this new solution. The next difference which comes between traditional IT and product development projects versus data is, do you go for a big bang release or do you go for a gradual rollout? Because let's say you're talking about a bank. If you don't do a big bang release and to all the branches, for example, you might again have data quality issues. Otherwise, if you try to do it also, your errors, your defects are also propagated across. So you again have to fix it, the patches and so on at a large scale. So this is again a balance that you need to maintain. The next part, and particularly it is very important for all the industries and end users, that whenever you are launching a new solution, will it also capture my previous data? Can I still use some of the reports from my previous system, or it's a totally new work altogether that we need to do? How would you import your past data into the new system, right? Or can we use some previous insights? So these are the questions that you typically would have to answer, right? And the last part is, sometimes the BI and data warehousing work that you get, it is not just a simple project, or we will work for 2 to 3 months and then we are done. Because it is a continuous work that you need to do, multiple stakeholders are involved at multiple levels. So it's more like a program rather than just like a task and a project, and it should be done as such. Now, Saurabh had a question. Can you discuss the difference between business-led and IT-led? Now, typically in an IT-led projects, business is more like offhand. So I'm a business sponsor and you just need to show the results. And it is more so severe in the case of product management, where business is more offhand. They would provide the money and they would have an occasional check whether you meet the parameters and you have delivered as per the objectives, but they are not more deeply involved. So whereas in a business-led project, business is involved right from the start, deeply, almost on an everyday basis, where they check the progress, where they focus on what needs to be delivered, is the team going in the right direction, so they mentor the team also. So that's the primary difference. So coming back to the next part, so I'm sure you guys are getting a lot of questions on how do we now solve this puzzle. So that's where now I want to come to the next set of slides, which will probably answer your questions, Zahid and Deepak. So when you see all this, and I'm sure all of you are aware of what Agile philosophy and Agile principles bring to the table. So when they talk about people matter more over practices, they talk about customer collaboration, they talk about responding to change over following a plan. So the Agile manifesto and the Agile principles can directly solve some of these problems or challenges that the BI and DW projects face. So let's go through these one by one, all these challenges that I mentioned, and then I'll probably talk about certain specific things and issues that we might talk about. So let's first talk about how do we involve business. Now, when Agile practices talk about customer collaboration, that means even when you are initiating the project, when you are writing your first backlog, right, or even the first set of requirements, involve the business stakeholders, involve the end users right at that point of time. Yes, you may not have all the requirements at that stage, as Zahid, you also kind of question. You may not be having all the details about what the end customers might need, but it is about a product increment that you are giving, a solution increment that you are giving, right? So potentially shippable increment, what Scrum talks about. So involving the business right from the start, making sure that they give you the right inputs, maybe doing some kind of a metaphor creation, doing some kind of a workshops before you get started is very important. Now, as I have been saying in my classes also, start of your project does not necessarily mean start of your sprints. So when you start your projects, you might still need to spend some time working with the business, setting the base groundwork, setting up the base data models where you can get started. And even defining the technology that you want to use. Do you want to go for full-fledged big data solutions? Would you like to have a mix of these, as the case might be? Another important benefit that might be is you should probably have the product owners from business, right? So involving product owners and creating products from a business will give more uh, ownership back to the business, that they need to drive these changes, they need to give inputs and so on. So definitely involving somebody from business as a product owner might help you there. Now the other question which was asked was, how do we involve the analyst and SMEs continuously? And this is where the concept of cross-functional team comes into the picture and fore, right? Because analysts and SMEs, they are the ones who would probably know the system better, the requirements better, the stakeholder expectations better. So it is very important that the analysts, the SMEs, the data scientists, the developers, and the testers, they work together as a cross-functional team. Maybe pick up one module, maybe pick up one portion of the data warehouse that you want to build, and then work together to build this. That will mean continuous testing, that will mean continuous reviews of what data we are pulling in, that might mean sampling of data sets which is almost continuous, so that you are not stuck at the end, oh we have so much testing to do and maybe this parameters do not work. So you are continuously getting a feedback from the people who know about it, right? That's something which is very important. Now for this part also, it is important that this team is stable, because if your team members keep on moving, the functional knowledge that you've got about that system or about that customer or about that particular part is very important. And the domain knowledge is very important for what you are doing. For example, let's talk about an e-com website, and you are creating a recommendation engine to map the behaviors of the end users. Now, if somebody knows how to work on that, what kind of end users typically you get, what kind of retail behaviors that they show, as the case might be. So involving somebody throughout who has this kind of knowledge is very important. Okay. So do involve your analysts in SMEs. And now the other question would come is, because these are rare skills, so how do we do it? Now, yes, these are rare skills, but shadowing comes into picture here. One of the team members probably plays a dual role in terms of they become the experts in their domain as well as whatever they are doing. So in a long term, this might definitely help the team, right? Yes, so Deepak's question, that's what I was trying to answer, because yes, as I said again, if you have certain SMEs that you think, or certain roles you think are not required full time for the project, it might be good to go back to the cricketing example and cross-arm people with the skills that they might also use. So while the developers might also become SMEs at some point of time, maybe one of the senior guys becomes, but that involves time investment from the team, members, as well as the expectation setting with the end users. So shadowing, pair programming, pair reviewing comes into picture here, so that in a long term you are able to groom team members who would be able to take up these roles. So that will give you a stable team. Next part, as Alad also asked, that how do we work on requirements in these kind of projects? So as I mentioned earlier also, you may not have all the information and the requirements that you need right at this start, and the users might change your requirements. So start with something that is known to you, and then do continuous backlog refinement, continuous workshops with the end users, regular reviews with them, so that you are able to you might be able to work from that perspective. And then if there are different modules that you're working on, you have different kind of stakeholders that you're working with, these guys need to meet together so that the cross dependency, so that any conflicting data sets you're creating, conflicting records that you're creating, conflicting reports you're creating, that might be eliminated. So a product owners council might be a great idea, which meets regularly, maybe every week, every 2 weeks, so that you can work on any dependencies, any cross references which might be required, and so on. In fact, if the product owners work more closely together, let's say for different modules within your data warehouse, it might actually reduce some of your work in case they discover, oh, this could be a common module which might feed data into multiple reports or multiple instances. Next comes continuous testing. Now, typically in a BI project, testing is more relegated to the end. Oh, just we'll create the data warehouse and we are waiting for the data set. We don't have the production data available. So this is something that the stakeholders, the business, as well as the senior guys need to work together. You need to think about continuous testing, continuous regression. Whatever data sets, reports I'm generating, does it fit with my previous data also, which was there before the solution was created. So here the testers are more partner with the product owners rather than getting information from the developers and from the analysts. So they are actually running ahead of the team, working with the product owners, working with the business stakeholders directly to understand their requirements and then creating tests, working on regression suits which will probably suit the team. It is also important to do smart testing, as I've always been saying, because when we talk about running tests for a BID project, it can actually become a mountain of test cases. So what you need to do and see is how we can continuously reduce the test set, because automation may not be as possible it is in a typical IT project or a development project. So your friend here is continuous breakdown of test cases, some smart testing, and impacted area analysis techniques or critical path analysis techniques, so that you are able to control some of the data sets that you need to test. So if this is okay, I would now like to go to the next slide. Now Deepak has another question here. So how will we resolve dependency with the source system or from a different team, probably, if I understand it right, Deepak, which might not be working in an agile mode and an iterative mode? Now this is where, as I said, still involving them as stakeholders in your regular meetings, plannings, design phases is still very important. And vice versa, a team which is working with agile practices, participating in the meetings that the other team are doing. So that is the first part of it. Second, you need to have regular checkpoints or regular connect points where, for example, they are giving an output, they are working on the design, there's a design output day or design complete day. So that's where the team meets together and they see what impact it would have on our system. So this is something which becomes a continuous exercise. In fact, I want to go to the next slide which will answer some more of those questions. Just to answer that question, Sandeep, that you asked, that can automation play a more effective role in this kind of project? So I'm not sure. It will actually depend on context to context. Will you be able to automate 100% or even 70%? That will really depend, because data mining, for example, you cannot automate all the test cases there, because if the data source changes, if the parameters change, you'll have to update your scripts, right? So your scripts might need to be changed continuously. Now coming to complete continuous integration, complete CI/CD may not be possible if your data sets are huge. But in kind of, yes, in big data you have real-time data coming in, you have continuous upgrade of the data, then you might be able to work on those aspects. But if you're talking not using big data and pure play BIDW, automation may not help. So you have to think and set the expectations. How would it improve? That does not mean you can use agile concept on some degree of automation. It will still be better than what we do now. So now let's go to the next set of challenges and problems. Now, as I said, telling people about the change is difficult. Making them to change is difficult. So it is very important that the Scrum Masters, the product owners, the project managers of BI and data warehousing projects, they induce value-driven behavior management. Maybe they sit down with all stakeholders involved in the project and ask them, tell them what value they are looking for. Why would they want this solution to be developed, right? How would it help them? And then designing the system which will fulfill some of those needs is important. And then when you are reviewing with them also, don't just focus on the technical details. Also focus on the business benefits that this new solution will derive. So it is more of a transformation management rather than a simple agile project or a simple project management thing. So you might even want to look into other change management models which are including VDBM, ADKAR and other transformation models which might help you here. The next part, which is a challenging area for this for the data projects, is should we go for a gradual rollout or should we go for a big bang approach? Now, it is important for the product owners, for the portfolio owners to work together on this and prepare a roadmap. Depending on the scope that you are working on, depending on the kind of changes you want to bring into reporting, into the data warehousing part, what kind of mining you need to do from different sources. So this is important that the vision and the roadmap is very clear to the team. A lot of times I have seen the vision and the roadmap is not even clear and made aware to the developers. So they are developing based on their own experience and some information they got from an analyst or an SME. But unless you understand why we are launching this, what do the business users are going to use this data, it will be very difficult to visualize future on and maybe incorporate some future requirements itself. So having a clear roadmap and making everyone aware of this roadmap is important. The second thing that you might think, depending on how your environment is set up, either you can go for maybe multiple intermediate releases or you can probably look for some kind of user labs. Just to take an example that I want to give here, and if you remember eBay, for example, probably a few years back, or even Flipkart a few years back, now when you buy a particular product, you would see certain pictures and recommended products there. Now this is where I think the big data is working there at the back of it. Until the time the social media was invented, those recommendations and the old big data systems working behind it were more focused on your behavior on that side. But the current recommendation engines, for example, they source in data from multiple repositories based on your browser history, based on your login into different sites as the case might be. Correct? So in this kind of scenarios, you may want to do certain intermediate releases and check the user inputs and user feedback. Whereas in other systems, for example, you're working with a bank, you cannot really simulate and push your new solution. You might want to set up a user lab and then involve and invite different end users who might use this data. Correct? So work on some sample data sets again, or kind of a copy of your production data if you can really source it. Now this is where you need business help also to continuously be able to help you upgrade those data. Then comes your evolutionary design and continuous regression integration. It is very, very important that in every sprint you focus on whatever you are delivering, even if it is one feature, one new data set you have created, it kind of integrates, it is compatible with the previous data or the previous system. There is a good backward integration. The concept that I've always been telling here again comes back to picture here, the past, present and future. So every cycle devote some time to look into your past behaviors, look into the defects, look into the challenges, focus on developing new features and updating new features, and focus on your future backlog. What do we need to do next? So the PPF rule comes into picture here again. Now coming to the last but not the least, treat your, so even though we call them the projects, data warehousing projects and so on, treat them more like a program. That means if there are multiple stakeholders involved, as Deepak already earlier also asked, you might have to have continuous meeting with your multiple stakeholders. You might have business working as a portfolio team, and which will be kind of looking into integrating inputs from different teams, working together with end users and so on. And then focus on multiple rhythm, multiple sprints and releases. So these are some of the ways you can probably work on the data warehousing projects. Now, Adarsh has a question here which I would like to answer this thing. So how to plan a sprint for the BI work, as it is more of analysis or insights to get to actual work, and also how to determine velocity, as every sprint may differ. So Adarsh, I'd like to answer your first question first here. Now, Scrum is not the only framework you might be able to use here. You might, when we think agility, agility is way beyond Scrum. So you might want to use Kanban, for example, here, which might help you track the flow of your project, which might help you understand the users first. So one of your features may be probably into the, as you rightly put, in the analysis stage or the insight stage for probably 2 weeks, right? Scrum says you need to have some kind of output every 2 weeks or 4 weeks, as the case might be. So when you are into the R&D, the initial design phase, you may focus more on Kanban. When you have certain requirements which are more stable, where you are more, okay, maybe 3-4 requirements are available, then you can probably start using sprints. Now within the sprints also, you will have to allocate time, which I call as the PPF concept: past, present and future. So future will be this R&D analysis work that will help you in the next set of requirements. So you have to devote some time every sprint, right? And that's where the concept of velocity also changes, because typically what we have been trying to do in Scrum is maximize velocity. Maximum velocity is not the goal here. The quality of the features that you're delivering, the completeness of the features you're delivering is the goal. So even if you deliver one item but that is complete, that is something that you need to focus upon. So velocity will pick up once you have a lot of insights and so on and so forth. So more than velocity, the predictability, acceleration and the quality of output is what is more important. So use Kanban at a release level, work on the PPF concepts, and then you will take it forward. Coming next, just to repeat a question from Saurabh, portfolio teams. Now, typically when you have large programs, so this is a concept again which you can also look at the SAFE website, safe30.com. You'll find more insights. But if you have a portfolio of products, multiple products or multiple modules working together, so there has to be a team which is working above all these products, giving the product owners of these various products or modules insights into how the overall release should go, how the overall product or solution should go, what could be the roadmap at an organization level, what could be on a release level. So portfolio teams work at a probably one level above all the product owners and release teams or multiple module teams to give the overall portfolio vision and work on aligning the business vision strategy with the product or the portfolio that you're working on. So that's what I mean with the portfolio teams. Now, do we have? If you have any more questions, you can also write to us. So this is where I will end the webinar today. But this is just something which is more like an overview we wanted to give. We do have more detailed insights, blogs, and trainings available on these concepts. Now, obviously, in the short time that we have had available, we can only cover the basics and high-level concepts. But if you'd like to know more, if you'd like to explore more of these, maybe in automation in your projects and so on, do feel free to contact us. As you are aware, our contact details are on your screen now, and most of you are also connected to us. So do please feel free to reach out to us, and we will be happy to answer any questions. So if there are no more questions, I would like to say thank you for keeping tuned. The recording of this webinar will again be available shortly on our various social media channels and our YouTube channel. And in case any other questions, please feel free to write back to us and we'll be happy to answer. So with this, I would say thank you very much. Enjoy your evening and I hope you have a nice day ahead.